I never imagined that I would meet someone like Daniel. I mean, I about burst out laughing when Ashley first introduced us at her backyard cookout. This short guy with thick-rimmed spectacles approaches me as I'm wearing a lovely sundress and wedges that accentuate my legs. Let me tell you how I got married to what is likely the only guy under 5'8" in the whole Phoenix metro area. My name is Lizzie, and I'm 29 years old and living my best life in Scottsdale, Arizona. Ashley virtually ambushed me, saying, "Lizzie, come meet Daniel," with a look on her face that suggested she was doing me a great favor. I was holding my mimosa and acting like I was interested in whatever it was Ashley's husband was asking me. I should have realized she was up to something at that very moment. Without sugarcoating things, Daniel was 5'7" on a good day and had a receding hairline that he attempted to cover up with a pricey haircut. It wasn't working, spoiler alert. His body screamed, "I haven't seen the inside of a gym since high school," and his thick spectacles gave his eyes an odd appearance. He then began discussing his most recent development project. He oversees construction projects for these upscale developments, and I saw that he was wearing a Rolex watch, not the blatantly phony ones you see men flaunting at nightclubs. When he told me that he had recently closed a deal on a new high-rise downtown, I'll admit that I was about to give an excuse and go. It was to hear him discuss it with such assurance, even though he had to look up at me because I'm 5'8" and not wearing heels. Interesting, but not particularly appealing. Later that evening, Ashley texted me, "He's super successful, just saying. The amount of $50. All right. Perhaps I was growing weary of the dating scene. All these attractive men with their ideal height and abs, but living in flats with 3 roommates, or attempting to succeed as business owners by selling protein shakes on Instagram. We went on our first date to an upscale downtown eatery. Daniel knew the owner, so he did more than simply get us a reservation. Having to carefully arrange our selfie so you couldn't tell he was shorter than me was made up for by watching him order wine, knowing just what to choose, and then casually handing over his black card at the end of the night. At our monthly wine night, I showed my girls the photos. Madison nearly spat up her Chardonnay as she focused on his face. Kylie said, "Girl, are you serious? He looks like my accountant," before grabbing her phone and looking him up on Google. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. "Shut up, building the new luxury complex," I said. "You're not getting any younger after all. Consider the future." My cousin, who got married out of love, has 3 children and a 2-bedroom apartment. The courtship went by quite quickly. Daniel introduced me to people who could spend tens of thousands on art, as I had always dreamt. Took me to charity galas, where everyone knew him, and took me shopping at places where I used to act like I was simply perusing. Imagine, complete with everything but butterflies in my tummy whenever my husband enters a room. Everything but the capability of sharing a couple's photo without meticulously figuring out the angles. Everything but genuine interest in my children's father. Now that I look back, I should have realized where this whole thing was going. I truly believed I could make it work, though, as I lived my greatest life stories and posted my blessed captions over the first year of our marriage. I honestly believed the high-end purses would compensate for the fact that I had to look down, give my husband a kiss. I genuinely believed that I was sensible enough to put stability ahead of attractiveness. I wasn't, to give you a hint. After playing the role of happy housewife for 3 years, I began to notice things like how our couple's pictures never quite looked right when I uploaded them. Something wasn't quite right, and it wasn't just the filters. Madison would share these idyllic beach photos of her and her husband, Chad, pulling their children up, appearing tall and athletic. In their date night photos, Ashley's partner would be taller than her, dressed in fitted suits. And there I was, always trying to think of a way to make Daniel look different from my younger brother. Our mommy wine nights. When our spouses were either working late or watching the kids, we would all gather around, phones out, going through our feeds and engaging in deep conversation. Madison would show us ask, "Did you see that new trainer at Equinox?" Now that's what a man should look like. I would reveal the truth after drinking 3 glasses of white wine. Daniel's face was actually in my shoulder blades as he attempted to give me a back hug this morning. I didn't even feel guilty about it, as they howled with laughter. Being honest at last felt terrific. When Darius began to warm up more, everything changed. After he split up with his fiancée, Ashley encouraged him to attend our Saturday brunches. I literally choked on my champagne when he initially entered the room wearing this form-fitting Henley that flaunted every muscle. Tall, of course, but also just mesmerizing. Whether he talked about his side gigs as a model or showed Kylie how to do a perfect squat after she pleaded with him to do so, he was everything Daniel wasn't. Naturally, I was compelled to draw comparisons. I used to think about how Darius looked in his exercise attire when Daniel would come home from work with his dress shirt a little rumpled and his small belly pressing against the buttons. I recalled how Darius would simply grab the nice wine glasses from the top cupboard without even reaching his arm all the way out when Daniel would stretch to reach them. Torture was what it was. We used the group chat as a place to confess. When I knew Darius would be at the gym, I traded in my old leggings for these and started looking for excuses to work out. Girl, did you see how Darius filled out those jeans? Today? Lizzie, he was totally checking you out during mimosas. Must be nice having some eye candy around instead of, adorable matching outfits that enhanced the appearance of my assets. In fact, Daniel pushed for it. Honey, I'm happy you're putting your health first. If only he knew that I was staring at Darius's deadlifts in the mirror. The awkwardness of our couple's game nights increased. I would stand close to Darius and laugh at all of his jokes, stroking his arm whenever he said something amusing. Daniel would sit there wearing his dad jeans and those terrible spectacles, trying to join the conversation with some dull tale about his new project, while I would swoon over his latest modeling gig whenever he mentioned it. Naturally, my pals noticed. He's really into you. They texted me while the games were going on. The chemistry is crazy. Just stating, better genes for baby number 3. I began to fear closeness with Daniel. How could I not make a comparison? I would think about how his body didn't feel like the males I saw at the gym, and how he had to virtually kiss me in heels whenever he tried to initiate. I began to make menstruation. In all honesty, I was unable to move past it. The worst thing was that Daniel was doing so well. He received a promotion to regional director, which came with greater benefits like a larger home and more money. However, it also meant that I would have to stand by him at more business gatherings and pretend that I wasn't dying inside every time someone gazed at us with that confused, pitying expression in their eyes. You could have both the money and the attraction, Madison stated one evening after drinking too much wine. I knew she was correct. There are plenty of successful guys who can kiss their wives without the use of a step stool. These executives and their trophy spouses, who all have similar heights and looks, are the couples I would encounter at Daniel's work functions. Every time we had to take a business photo, I was there looking like I had lost a wager. I desired to pass away. The photographer would constantly attempt to artistically arrange us in order to conceal the disparity in height, but there is only so much they can do. The females began giving me dating coach DVDs about leveling up and recognizing your worth, and they were right when they said that settling simply breeds bitterness. Everything about Daniel annoyed me, including the way his neck made his ties seem off, the way his pricey suits couldn't cover his body type, and the way he would get tired playing with the kids in the backyard while Darius was out running marathons. I began to ponder what my life would have been like had I waited, if I hadn't been so pragmatic and security-focused. Perhaps I could have found someone who was as successful as I was attractive, someone I wouldn't have to crop myself in pictures, next to someone who would make me feel like a fragile flower rather than an Amazonian warrior. The tipping point was approaching. I sensed it intensifying. I would flinch each time Daniel reached for me. At our get-togethers, I would always sense a connection with Darius that I had never experienced with my husband. Our group conversation has another "don't settle" statement. I was dying of embarrassment every time we went out in public, even though on paper I was leading this ideal life. In hindsight, I suppose I was preparing us both for the next step. However, my only thought at the time was how I had put myself in this financial security cage with a man I couldn't even proudly share on my main Instagram page. Something had to give after too many wine nights, too many thirst trap reels, and too many comparisons to the life I could have had. Our Tuesday morning mommy gatherings were the beginning of that. We would all get together at Ashley's house to watch our children play in her specially designed playground, which was supervised by a full-time nanny. Naturally, the actual conversation would begin at that point. Madison commented, "I'm just worried about Emma," while stirring her coffee one morning. "Kids can be so cruel. What if she gets teased about having a short dad?" Kylie said, "Oh my God, I was literally thinking the same thing." At 3 a.m., they weren't saying anything that hadn't crossed my mind. Like, what if Lucas inherits his height? You're basically setting your son up for a lifetime of bullying when looking at genetic inheritance-related TikToks. During my children's checkups, I would find myself looking at their growth charts and hoping that they would magically inherit my side of the family's height. During these meetings, Daniel would be in his home office conducting his incessant Zoom calls on development opportunities. The room would occasionally be silent when he came down for coffee, save for these tiny, stifled giggles. How could he not realize that we were discussing him? He once wore a brand new suit that he had purchased, one that was pricey, custom-tailored, and everything. But all I could see was how it somehow made him appear even shorter, like a child, dressing up in his father's clothes. Ashley yelled out, "Nice suit, Daniel!" And after he had gone, she turned to talk to me. I shouldn't have laughed, but I did. "He kind of looks like those little guys who stand on wedding cakes, doesn't he?" I asked myself, and I was unable to stop once I got going. Oh my God, he does. I'm never going to unsee that now. After that, the jokes became more offensive. My buddies would often say these tiny things whenever he tried to kiss me goodbye in front of them. "Look at him on his tippy toes. Lizzie, bend down. He can't reach. It's like Snow White and one of her dwarfs." And what's even worse? I began to participate. It was simpler than standing up for him, than admitting that I had made this decision, than confessing that I had chosen financial stability over physical appeal. We essentially lost our intimacy. My buddy's jokes were all I could think about, so how could I get into the mood? His thinning hair, his doughy midsection, and his height, God, especially his height, were the only things I could perceive. When they pointed out his defects, I would imagine the sensation of Darius's hands on his customers as he was modifying their form each time he touched me. Our conversation turned nasty. This made me think of Daniel, and then I saw memes about garden gnomes. Is the BO section where he shops? Requesting a friend. Do you recall Lizzie's relationship with the basketball player? Check for upgrades and downgrades. I ought to have turned it off. I ought to have stood up for my spouse, who is the father of my kids. Rather, I began to contribute. Since it fits better in the children's closet, I had to store his dry cleaning. There. I swear that the stress caused him to grow gray hair when I asked him to retrieve something from the top shelf. This morning, I saw him in the restroom using Emma's step stool. The fact that Darius was still alive just made matters worse. He would appear as though he had stepped out of a men's fitness magazine when he attended our weekend barbecues. Daniel would try to talk to him about sports or whatever while wearing his casual attire, which included ill-fitting khakis and those terrible loafers. Observing the difference was physically taxing. Darius was moving furniture around as if it were nothing while assisting with the setup of a pool party one Saturday. Daniel, who could hardly move a single chair, volunteered to assist. I wanted to bury myself in the ground when I observed my friends glancing at each other. Madison actually whispered, "Girl, you messed up." when Darius removed his shirt to go swimming with the kids. The problem is, she was correct. I hadn't made a mistake by getting married to Daniel. That was a wise choice. In a technical sense, I made a mistake by believing that I could disregard the physical and concentrate on the practical, therefore forcing attraction. I thought that having to look down to kiss my husband could be compensated for with a platinum card and a Range Rover. The only way I could deal with the embarrassment was to increase my drinking during our social events. When my pals would remark about trading up or upgrading to the tall model, it was simpler to laugh at the jokes and join in. It was simpler to stand too close to Darius at parties, to flirt with him, and to laugh too heartily at his jokes while Daniel looked on from the other side of the room. The children also began to notice. One day, Emma asked her friend's father why he was so much larger than her own when she got home from school. In pictures, Lucas began to stand on his tiptoes. I should have stopped it all. I should have been appalled. Instead, I saw myself looking at my pals with knowing eyes and making excuses about how Daddy is simply wonderful. I was on my way to catastrophe. Even Daniel, who remained silent about it all, could see it. He simply put in more hours and stayed in his office longer, presumably believing that if he earned enough money, bought me enough things, and gave me an even more opulent lifestyle, it would somehow compensate for what he was unable to alter. However, no amount of money could make up for the fact that every time I looked at him, I only saw his imperfections. I could only hear the jokes that my companions were telling. I was only able to reflect on how I had settled, how I had given up enthusiasm for pragmatism, and how I had prioritized financial stability over physical appeal. The company's Christmas party followed. Early that day, I began to drink. The girls arrived with champagne and their customary commentary to assist me in getting dressed. Madison helped me zip up my dress and remarked, "At least you can wear your highest heels since Daniel won't be in any of the photos anyway." Kylie said, "Girl, please tell me Darius is coming," after having already consumed 3 mimosas. Someone needs to give these corporate wives something to look at. I was giddy by the time we arrived at the location, a posh resort in North Scottsdale. Daniel likely knew I would drink, so he had hired a driver. It was made worse somehow by the fact that he was always thoughtful like that. Like, quit being so flawless on paper even when you're so far from what I desire. When we got there, the party was in full swing, with all of these businessmen and their ideal spouses looking like they were out of a corporate Christmas card. As soon as possible, Daniel's boss arrived with champagne in hand and began to talk endlessly about how Daniel had secured this significant contract, how he was the youngest regional director in the company's history, and so on. My own joke made me laugh. "He must have to work twice as hard to get people to look up to him," I heard myself remark. Daniel's fingers tightened around my waist, and the boss's smile froze. He said, "Lizzie, perhaps we ought to get some water." I was just irritated by that. I was so loud that several people in the vicinity turned to stare. "What, afraid I'll tell everyone how you need a step stool to kiss me goodnight?" I asked. At least the portion of Daniel's face that I could see without stooping was red. I was on a roll when he attempted to direct me to the bar, most likely so I could have that water. Every resentful idea, cruel joke from the group chat, an analogy to Darius all came flooding out. I said to the assembling audience, "You know what's funny?" I gave him a hazy gesture while wobbling slightly in my heels, which further highlighted the disparity in height between us. When we first met, I thought, well, at least he's successful, like that would make up for everything else. "Lizzie, please," Daniel said. "You're drunk. Let's step outside." I burst out laughing, that cruel drunken laugh that you can't stop once it starts. "Oh my God! Even when you're trying to be authoritative, I can't take you seriously," I said. People were clearly gazing now. I literally have to look down at. Daniel's coworkers were looking at each other, and I could see their wives speaking behind their hands. However, something that was uncontrollable had been released in me by the champagne. I was virtually yelling, "You want to know something?" I lost it when Daniel grabbed my arm and tried to pull me away. Every time we take a family photo, every time we go out in public, every time you try to act like some big-shot businessman, I'm embarrassed. Actually embarrassed. Like, how did I end up with the one successful guy in Scottsdale who could qualify as a little person? Daniel said. I staggered a little on my heels as I wrenched away from him. Don't touch me. I'm too tired to act like this any longer. Do you realize how difficult it is to pretend that I'm interested in you? To smile at all of your small pictures? And to laugh at all of your little jokes? Every time someone wonders, if you're standing in a hole in our wedding photo, I pretend I'm not dying inside. There was utter silence in the room. In an attempt to obscure the scene, someone turned up the Christmas music, but it only added to the bizarre atmosphere. What's very humorous, you know? I was crying, my makeup getting smudged by my inebriated tears. It wasn't until just now that I understood how little I ever regarded you. Oh my God, it's true. Even if I thought I was simply kidding around with my pals and complying with their remarks. I don't respect you at all. Daniel simply stood there staring at me with a face I had never seen before. Disappointment rather than rage or even hurt. As though he had finally realized who I truly was, and he wasn't even shocked. In an attempt to diffuse the tension, his boss intervened. No, I'm not finished. Maybe we should get you some air, Mrs. Everyone here acts like Daniel is a rising star, a catch, and an incredible person. Yet take a look at him. Take a look at him. Without assistance, our kitchen's top shelf is inaccessible to the shortest executive in the room, who most likely shops in the teen area. And what am I expected to do? Show gratitude? Feel proud? Be energized? Daniel's supervisor and several other executives had to take over at that point. As I continued to vent and release years of bottled-up anger, they began guiding me to the exit. Are you curious about the true joke? As they took me to the door, I yelled. I squandered my attractive years on a person who should be given a seat at business dinners. The last thing I saw before they dragged me outside was Daniel's face as he stared at the floor, his coworkers patting his shoulder while their wives scowled at me. I could have had anyone, but I chose the safe option, the smart choice, the successful little man who'd give me everything except what I actually wanted. He appeared small, not just in appearance, but also as though he had somehow lost some of his inner bulk. The chilly air began to pierce the drunken fog as we waited for our driver in the parking lot, and I became aware of what I had just done. However, I felt relieved rather than guilty, as if I had finally expressed all the things I had been thinking for years, all the jokes my friends and I had made in our group chat, and all the nasty little thoughts I had been burying my head in, while pretending to grin. I believed that letting everything out would feel better, but instead I felt cold and empty, so chilly. The following morning, I had perhaps 50 missed calls and the worst hangover of my life. There was only a text message saying, "Staying at a hotel, don't call," and Daniel hadn't returned home. My mind was racing as I combed through my phone, attempting to piece together just how awful last night had been. Ashley was called first, but she didn't answer. Neither Kylie nor Madison did. On my fourth attempt, Madison finally responded. "What did you do, girl?" She sounded strange and aloof, unlike the gossipy person she usually is. I was merely expressing what we all discuss. Wincing at the sound of my voice, I defended myself. "You have said worse things in the group chat after all. We didn't say anything in front of his whole organization, though. My hubby is enraged." "I'm no longer permitted to hang out with you," he remarked. "In fact," she chuckled, but not in the way she usually does. "I wouldn't, anyway. You didn't simply cross the boundary, Lizzie. You nuked it." I looked through our group chat, but I couldn't locate any examples of her own hurtful remarks. I had actually been kicked out of our group chat after years of participation. The doorbell rang. It was my mother. Ashley had received a call last night from someone, most likely her husband. She said, "Elizabeth Marie," and entered without waiting for an invitation. I tried to explain the height difference, the lack of attractiveness, and how awkward it was to constantly be the out-of-match pair. "What have you done?" I asked. Now, however, with my mother staring at me as if I were a stranger, the words seemed hollow in the chilly daylight. "That man," she said with a trembling voice, "has given you everything. Everything. A beautiful home, healthy children, financial security, and you humiliated him in front of his entire company because of what? He's not tall enough for your Instagram. Aesthetic? Mom, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand. Your father was 5'6". You know that, and he was the best man I've ever known. We raised you better than this." Emma rubbed her eyes as she came downstairs. My phone chimed before I could respond. "Where's Daddy?" Daniel texted me again, saying, "My lawyer will contact you this week. I'm staying with Brad. The kids can stay with you until we figure things out, but I'll pick them up for dinner tonight." Brad is the co-worker who lived in that upscale downtown high-rise, the one whose wife had given me that look last night when they were taking me out. I made another attempt to call my friends. At last, Ashley answered. "Look," she murmured, with a weary tone. "Marcus showed me all the screenshots." "What screenshots?" "Of our group chat. All those jokes, all those mean comments. The other, husbands have them too. They've been sharing them with Daniel for months, apparently keeping receipts." My stomach sank. The remainder of the day was a haze of unanswered calls and awkward realizations. "What do you mean, keeping receipts?" "Everything. Lizzie. Every time we made fun of his height, every time he drooled over Darius, every time we compared Daniel to taller men. Their husbands have been collecting it all, and now," she paused, "now everyone knows what kind of friends we were, what kind of wife you were." The director of the preschool contacted them to inquire about the family's circumstances. On one occasion, Kylie texted, "Thanks for ruining everything. Tom's making me go to marriage counseling now. Says he needs to know if I talk about him the way you talk about Daniel." Emma had apparently been telling her pals that Mommy thinks Daddy is too small to love. By evening, it was a ghost town on social media. Those who had enjoyed each and every one of my flawlessly staged family portraits had fallen silent. Some had entirely unfollowed me. Around 6, Daniel arrived to pick up the children. He appeared lighter in some way, as though he had dropped a great burden he had been carrying rather than defeated, as I had anticipated. Emma called out to him, "Daddy?" He refused to look at me when I asked, "Are you coming home?" "Not tonight, Princess," I began, but he interrupted, saying, "Go? Get your brother and your overnight bags." He finally looked me in the eyes, likely for the first time in our marriage. "Not now, Lizzie. Not ever, actually. You made yourself very clear last night." "I was drunk. You were honest." The children returned with their luggage. Daniel, who looked much like the short, unremarkable father I'd been so embarrassed of, held them both in his hand. They gazed up at him as though he were the tallest person in the world. He said, "The lawyer will call tomorrow," and they left. I sat by myself in our large, empty house, surrounded by all the pricey items that were meant to make up for my shallow disappointment. Don't bother coming to the New Year's party at Brad's. Everyone heard what you really think of us little people. It was the final buzzing of my phone. In her lengthy Facebook apologies to her husband, Madison mentioned poisonous friendships, learn to value the important things in life, and tagged all the other women. No one tagged me. On the counter was a packet my mother had left with recommendations for divorce attorneys. There was a post-it note with the words, Your father would be so disappointed. I didn't cry because I felt about what I had said. It was all true, really. But everything. My friends, my social standing, and my ideal life. The worst thing? I was previously unfollowed on Instagram by Darius. After 6 months, my life has changed significantly from what I had anticipated. It was a swift divorce. As it happens, Daniel had spent months getting ready. The prenuptial agreement was sound, and his attorney arrived with enough proof of my emotional abuse to make it futile to challenge it. I was forced to leave our lovely home in North Scottsdale. I used to drive past this little apartment off Camelback and say, "Thank God I'm married." Well, the Range Rover returned to the showroom. Whatever it is, I currently drive a secondhand Hyundai. My old, unmarried acquaintances from before Daniel, who had always thought I was crazy to marry because of my appearance, began to show up again. We visit the same clubs that we frequented in our 20s, but something has changed. It might be me. Perhaps it's because I'm a 30-something divorced mother. Or perhaps it's simply that the tall, attractive males I've always admired aren't exactly eager to date someone with my problems. I met a lovely guy on Hinge last week who is 6'4" and looks like he lives at the gym. He is the type of guy I always felt I deserved. And when we for drinks at this trendy spot in Old Town, his first question was, "So why did your marriage end?" It turns out that the story made the rounds in the Scottsdale social scene. Oh, wait. You're the one who went off about her short husband at that Christmas party. He didn't ask for a second date. The kids now spend the majority of their time with Daniel. I tried to act calm and pretend that we were drifting apart. The last custody hearing was last month, and I went into the courthouse feeling confident because I am their mother. But then they played recordings of me at school functions, playdates, and birthday parties. All these little remarks about Daniel's height. All these jokes I had made in front of the kids. Things I didn't even remember saying. His lawyer made a big deal out of my pattern of behavior that could be emotionally damaging to them. During Emma's dance recital last week, Daniel and his new girlfriend were in the front row. She is the author of a children's book about accepting differences or something like that, and she is exactly his height. They look like they fit, and I noticed that she was wearing flat shoes, something I had never thought to do before. I watched them with our kids in the back, and Emma ran to them after the show, and I heard her ask, "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy love you anymore?" "I don't think she ever did, sweetheart," Daniel remarked calmly, gazing at her with those gentle eyes that I used to find so uninteresting. The truth in those words struck a deeper chord than any of the judge's rulings. My married friends have all vanished. Their husbands forced them to make a decision. Madison and her tall husband are still together in their ideal home. Ashley is planning a vow renewal, and Kylie posts about growing up and tags her husband in posts of gratitude. The other night, I found myself at a bar in downtown Phoenix, which is not my usual scene, but I needed a place where no one knew my story. This guy bought me a drink, and it turned out that he was a personal trainer just like Darius. For a moment, I felt that old thrill, that physical attraction I had always desired, until he mentioned that he had a roommate, drove for Uber on the side, and was currently in between gyms. I thought about Daniel's black AMX, about the housekeeper he used to pay for, and about the college funds for the kids that were already fully funded. The guy asked for my number. I didn't give it to him. My mom still barely speaks to me. She sent me a photo album last week, pictures of her and my dad when they were young. He really was short. I guess I'd forgotten, but in every photo, she's looking at him like he's the tallest man in the room. I tried to remember if I ever looked at Daniel that way. I don't think I did. Sometimes late at night in my tiny apartment, after another meaningless date or another evening watching my kids run to Daniel's new girlfriend for hugs, I think about what I really lost, not just the lifestyle, style, or the security, or the social status, but the chance to be loved by someone who would have done anything for me, the chance to teach my children that character matters more than appearance, the chance to be a better person than I turned out to be. I saw Daniel at a restaurant last weekend. He was there with the kids and his girlfriend, all of them laughing about something. He looked happy, really happy, in that way that has nothing to do with height or looks or any of the things I'd obsessed over. Emma waved to me, but Lucas pretended not to see me. He started standing up straighter lately, probably because of all those comments I made about his dad's height. Another thing I'll never be able to take back. My lease is up next month and I can't afford to renew it. The boutique job barely covers my bills, and Daniel's support is just enough to keep me afloat. I scroll through real estate listings in areas I used to turn my nose up at, looking for somewhere that accepts Section 8 housing. Sometimes I catch my reflection in my phone screen while I'm doing this. Still pretty, still tall, still the kind of woman who turns heads for all the good it does me now. The other day, someone who didn't know my story asked me if I had any advice for single women in the dating scene. I thought about it for a long time, about all the things I mattered: height, looks, physical attraction, and about all the things I took for granted: stability, kindness, and genuine love. Yeah, I said finally, don't be me. They laughed, thinking it was a joke. But somewhere in my overpriced apartment, in a box I still haven't unpacked, there's a wedding photo of me looking down at Daniel with a smile I thought was real at the time. And every night I look up at my ceiling and wonder if I'll ever be able to look myself in the eye again.